I stood at the entrance of a mansion I'd never seen before, holding a lemon cake that suddenly felt like it weighed 100 pounds. Through the crystal doors, I could see chandeliers throwing golden light across marble floors, hear champagne glasses clinking, smell rosemary and roasted lamb mixing with expensive perfume. My son's laughter floated through the air, but it wasn't meant for me. Then I heard her voice, clear as a bell, sharp as winter. Caleb's mother couldn't make it tonight, right? Such a shame. She would have loved seeing him this happy. My breath caught in my throat. I pressed closer to the doorframe, my worn blue dress suddenly feeling like burlap against my skin. The woman speaking wore white silk that probably cost more than my entire year's worth of groceries. Her diamond earrings caught the light every time she turned her head, and her hand rested possessively on someone's arm just out of my view. Well, another voice chimed in, a man's voice thick with wine and satisfaction. Caleb's done remarkably well for himself.
Self-made man.
Built himself from nothing. From nothing.
The words hit me like a slap.
I'd given him everything. 23 years of double shifts at the diner. Second-hand textbooks I'd spent hours hunting down. Nights I'd gone to bed hungry, so he could have seconds. Medical school tuition I'd paid by selling my mother's wedding ring, the only thing of value I'd ever owned. From nothing. Oh, there you are, darling. The woman in white moved, and I finally saw him. My Caleb. 34 now, wearing a suit that made him look like a stranger. His hair was different, slicked back instead of the soft curls I used to brush my fingers through. Even his smile looked rehearsed, polished, like something he'd bought along with everything else in this palace he called home. The woman kissed his cheek, and my heart cracked clean down the middle. Everyone, Caleb said, raising his glass, his voice carrying that confidence I'd once been so proud of. I want to thank my beautiful wife, Camilla, for putting together this incredible evening.
Wife.
The cake slipped in my hands. I caught it just before it hit the ground, but the movement drew attention. A server passing by stopped and looked at me, taking in my homemade dress with its slightly crooked hem, my sensible shoes with the scuff on the left toe, my gray hair that I'd tried so hard to pin up nice. Ma'am, the server said, not unkindly, but with that professional distance that made it clear I didn't belong. Are you with the catering company? The kitchen entrance is around back. Before I could answer, before I could find my voice buried somewhere beneath the shock, I saw Camilla's eyes land on me through the glass. She tilted her head, curious, then dismissive. She turned back to the guests, already forgetting the old woman at the door. But then Caleb looked. His face went white as snow. Our eyes met across 20 feet of expensive marble, across years of unanswered phone calls and forgotten birthdays, across a distance I'd tried so hard to bridge with letters I'd written but never sent. His mouth opened.
Closed.
Opened again. I lifted the cake slightly, a pathetic offering, a grandmother's desperate attempt to still matter. The blue roses I'd spent 3 hours piping onto the buttercream suddenly looked childish and sad. Caleb handed his glass to someone, said something I couldn't hear, and started walking toward the door.
Toward me.
Each step he took made my heart beat faster, made hope and dread wrestle in my chest. Maybe he'd smile. Maybe he'd hug me. Maybe he'd say, Mom, what a wonderful surprise. Come in. Let me introduce you to everyone. Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Warm welcome to the family. Enjoy the story. He reached the door and opened it, stepping outside into the cool evening air. Up close, I could see the boy I'd raised somewhere behind those careful eyes. But something else lived there too. Something cold. Something that made my stomach turn. Mom, he said quietly, glancing back at the party, at the people who couldn't hear us out here. His hand gripped the door handle like he was holding it closed, keeping me out. What are you doing here? Not I've missed you. Not I'm so glad to see you. What are you doing here? I opened my mouth to answer, to explain about the flyer I'd found, about how I'd taken 3 buses to get here, about how I'd been practicing what to say for a week. But before I could speak, Camilla appeared in the doorway behind him, her smile perfectly pleasant and completely empty. Darling, she said, is everything all right? Then her eyes landed on me properly for the first time, really seeing me, and something flickered across her face.
Oh.
Who's this? Caleb's jaw tightened. 5 seconds passed.
10.
The silence stretched between us like a chasm. And then my son, my beautiful boy who I'd rocked to sleep and taught to read and believed in with every fiber of my being, looked at his wife and said the words that would change everything. Nobody important. Just someone from my old neighborhood. She must have gotten confused about where the service entrance is. Nobody important. Those words followed me home on 3 different buses, through neighborhoods that got smaller and shabbier with each transfer, until I finally reached my little house with the peeling paint and the hydrangeas I'd planted the year Caleb was born. I set the cake on the kitchen counter, still perfect, still untouched, and stared at it until the streetlight outside my window turned on. 71 years old, and I'd just become invisible to the only person who'd ever really mattered. I pulled out the drawer where I kept them. 37 letters, written over 6 years, each one sealed and addressed but never mailed. The paper had yellowed at the edges. My handwriting looked older with each one, shakier, like I was disappearing even from my own words. Dear Caleb, the first one started, I saw a robin today and thought of you. Remember when you were 8 and found that baby bird? You cried when we had to let it go. I'd written that letter the week after his wedding. The wedding I wasn't invited to. He'd called me 2 months later, casual as anything, and mentioned it like he was telling me about a dentist appointment. Oh, by the way, Mom, I got married.
Small ceremony.
You know how it is. I didn't know how it is. I'd spent my whole life imagining dancing with my son at his wedding, wearing something nice, crying happy tears like mothers are supposed to do. The second letter was from his birthday the following year. Dear Caleb, I baked your favorite cake today, even though you weren't here to eat it. Mrs. Chun from next door helped me finish it.
She asked about you.
I told her you were doing wonderful things. I'd always told people he was doing wonderful things. Even when months passed between phone calls. Even when those calls got shorter and shorter, his voice more distracted, more distant, until I could hear him typing on his computer while I talked. The latest letter sat on top, dated 3 weeks ago. I hadn't sealed this one yet. Dear Caleb, I'm not sure you remember, but your father proposed to me in my garden.
It wasn't fancy.
We didn't have money for fancy. But he picked every single hydrangea bloom and made a path to where he was kneeling. He said, Ellie, I might not have much, but I'll love you and our family with everything I've got. That's what I try to teach you, son. That love matters more than marble floors and crystal chandeliers. My hand trembled as I put the letter back. Maybe I should have mailed them. Maybe if he'd known I was still here, still thinking of him, still loving him despite the silence, things would be different. But deep down, in that place where mothers keep the truths they don't want to face, I knew better. Those letters would have sat unopened on some assistant's desk, filed away under handled. Just another piece of his old life he'd decided to erase. I walked to my bedroom and opened the closet. In the back, behind my church dresses and winter coats, hung the outfit I'd worn to his high school graduation. A simple yellow dress with white buttons. I'd bought it at a thrift store and altered it myself, staying up until 2 in the morning to get the hem right. That day, Caleb had hugged me so tight, I could barely breathe. Mom, he'd whispered, I'm going to make you proud. I'm going to make all of this worth it. Everything you've sacrificed, I'm going to pay you back 1,000 times over. I'd cried then. Happy tears. Believing in miracles tears. Now I touched that yellow dress and wondered when exactly my son had decided I was something to be ashamed of. Was it medical school, when his classmates talked about their parents' vacation homes and country clubs? Was it his first job, when he met people who summered in the Hamptons and wintered in Aspen? Or was it gradual, so slow I didn't notice, like watching someone walk away until they disappear over the horizon? The phone on my nightstand stayed silent. No call. No text. No, Mom. I'm sorry, let me explain. Just silence, heavy as grief. I sat on my bed and picked up the framed photo from the nightstand. Caleb at 6 years old, missing his 2 front teeth, holding up a drawing he'd made of our house. He'd drawn me 10 feet tall, a giant mother protecting a tiny stick figure boy. The son in his picture had a smiley face, and he'd written in crayon at the bottom, "My mom is the best in the whole world." The whole world. I'd kept that drawing for 28 years, tucked inside this frame, looking at it every morning and every night. My beautiful boy, who couldn't spell. My ambitious son, who climbed so high he forgot where he came from. My Caleb, who stood in a mansion I'd never seen and called me nobody. I put the photo face down on the nightstand. Not because I didn't love him, but because looking at it hurt in ways I didn't have names for. Outside, Mrs. Chen's dog barked. A car drove past. Life kept moving, indifferent to the fact that mine had just cracked apart. And somewhere, in a mansion full of people who thought he'd built himself from nothing, my son was probably pouring another glass of champagne, laughing at jokes I'd never hear, living a life that had no room for the woman who'd given him everything. Maybe I should have mailed those letters after all. Maybe then I'd know for certain that he'd chosen this, that it wasn't confusion or fear or some terrible misunderstanding. But I already knew the truth. The calls used to come every Sunday, like clockwork. Like something I could count on the way I counted on sunrise and the smell of coffee in the morning. Then they came every other Sunday. Then once a month. Then only on holidays, and even those got shorter, more obligatory, like he was checking items off a list. Call mom. Send Christmas card. Done. The breaking didn't happen all at once. That's what people don't understand. It wasn't an explosion. It was erosion. Water wearing down stone so slowly you don't notice until there's nothing left but a hole. It started 4 years ago, right after he made partner at some big investment firm in Portland. He called me, excited in a way I hadn't heard since he'd gotten into medical school. "Mom, this is it. This is everything I've been working for. I'm in a different league now." A different league. I'd smiled when he said it, proud and terrified at the same time. I'd wanted success for him. God knows I'd sacrificed enough for it. But something in his voice made my stomach twist. Like he wasn't just talking about work. Like he was talking about leaving something behind. A week later, he forgot my birthday. Just forgot. No call, no card, nothing. When I mentioned it the next time we talked, he'd sounded genuinely confused. "Wait, that was last week. Mom, I'm drowning here. You know how it is." I didn't know how it is. But I said it was fine. Mothers always say it's fine. Then came Thanksgiving. He promised he'd come home, promised we'd do the whole thing, turkey and stuffing and pumpkin pie, just like when he was young. I spent 3 days preparing, made his favorite dishes, cleaned the house until it shined, even bought a new tablecloth. He called at noon. "Mom, I'm so sorry. Something came up at work. I'll make it up to you at Christmas, I promise."
Christmas came. Same story.
Emergency meeting with clients from Japan. You understand, right? I stopped expecting him after that. Stopped setting extra places at my table. Stopped jumping every time the phone rang. But I didn't stop hoping. That's the curse of mothers. We hope even when hope is stupid, even when it cuts us every single time. The worst part was watching him change through the tiny windows he'd give me into his life. A 2-minute phone call here. A rushed text there. His vocabulary shifted. He started using words like optics and leverage and strategic positioning. He talked about people I'd never met like I was supposed to know them. "Marcus thinks I should diversify. Camilla's father has connections in Seattle." Camilla. That's how I learned her name. Not, "I'm dating someone, Mom, and I'd love for you to meet her." Just dropped casually into conversation like she was old news, like I'd been part of the story all along. "That's wonderful, honey," I'd said, my heart sinking. "When do I get to meet her?" "Oh, we're both so busy."
Soon though.
Definitely soon. Soon turned into never. A year later, I found out they were engaged through a Facebook post someone tagged him in. One of his old college friends, someone who probably didn't know Caleb, had been editing me out of his life one phone call at a time. The photo showed them at some fancy restaurant, Camilla holding up her hand, a diamond so big it looked fake catching the camera flash. I'd called him immediately. My hands shook so bad, I almost couldn't dial. Oh, yeah, he'd said when he answered, like I'd asked him about the weather. I was going to tell you. Just been crazy busy with the wedding planning. Wedding planning? When's the wedding? Next month. It's going to be small. Really private. Just close friends and family. You know how Camilla is about keeping things intimate. I didn't know how Camilla was about anything. I'd never met her. Never even seen a photo he'd sent me directly. I'd love to come, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I could take the bus up. I wouldn't be any trouble. The pause that followed lasted maybe 5 seconds. But I heard everything he didn't say in that silence. Mom, it's complicated. Camilla's family is very traditional, very formal, and with you not really understanding that world, I just think it might be uncomfortable for you. I don't want you to feel out of place. Out of place. At my own son's wedding. I'm your mother, I'd whispered. I know, and I'll send you pictures. I promise. This doesn't change anything, but it changed everything. After the wedding, the calls got even rarer. Every conversation felt rehearsed, like he was reading from a script. Work's great. Camilla's great. We're thinking about buying a bigger place. How's your garden? My garden. Like that was all I was. Some quaint old lady with dirt under her fingernails and nothing interesting to say. I tried to keep the connection alive. Sent him articles about things he used to care about. Mailed him homemade cookies for his birthday. Left voicemails saying I was proud of him, that I missed him, that my door was always open. He never mentioned receiving any of it. Last Christmas, I finally asked the question I'd been too afraid to ask. Caleb, did I do something wrong? Did I hurt you somehow?
What? No, Mum.
You're being dramatic. I'm just busy building a life. Adults have responsibilities. You should be happy I'm successful. I am happy. I'd wanted to scream. I'm happy you're successful. I'm just sad I'm not part of it. But I didn't say that. Instead, I said what I always said. I love you, honey. Love you too. Gotta run. 3 weeks ago, Mrs. Chun found a flyer on her windshield. Some marketing company promoting local businesses, showing off big houses in the area, featuring success stories. And there it was. A full-page spread. Whitford Industries celebrates 5 years of excellence. Join CEO Caleb Whitford and his wife Camilla for an exclusive dinner celebrating family, success, and the American dream. Whitford. Not Morrison. He'd changed his name. Changed his whole identity. Become someone new. Someone who didn't have a mother who wore secondhand dresses and lived in a house with peeling paint. Mrs. Chun had brought it to me with worried eyes. Ellie, isn't this your boy? I'd stared at that flyer for an hour. At his photo, so polished and professional. At the mansion in the background. At the date and time of the dinner. And I'd made a decision. A stupid, hopeful, desperate decision. Maybe if he saw me. Maybe if we talked face to face instead of through rush phone calls. Maybe if I showed up with his favorite cake and reminded him who he used to be, who we used to be to each other. Maybe things could be different. A mother waits, even when the waiting hurts. That's what I told myself. That patience and love would win eventually. But standing at that door, holding that cake, hearing him call me nobody, I finally understood. He hadn't forgotten me. He'd erased me on purpose. Monday morning, I woke up with a plan forming in my head, small and quiet, but growing stronger with every heartbeat. I wasn't going to cry anymore. I wasn't going to sit in my kitchen staring at uneaten cake and 37 letters that would never be read. I was going to try one more time. The dinner was Saturday. 5 days away. 5 days to prepare, to make myself undeniable, to show up so put together and presentable that even Caleb couldn't pretend I didn't belong. If it was shame that made him hide me, then I'd give him nothing to be ashamed of. I pulled every dollar I'd been saving from the coffee can in the back of my pantry. $347, meant for a new water heater that had been limping along for 2 years. The water heater could wait. This couldn't. First stop was the fabric store downtown, the one I hadn't visited since Caleb graduated college. The smell hit me the moment I walked in, cotton and possibility and memories of staying up late at my old Singer sewing machine, making his Halloween costumes and patching his jeans and creating something from nothing, because that's what we did. I found a bolt of fabric the color of a clear sky, soft blue with a subtle sheen. Not too fancy, not too plain. Exactly $37 for 4 yards. The young woman at the counter smiled at me. Making something special? A dress, I said. For a family dinner. That's lovely. Your family's lucky to have you. I didn't correct her. Just paid and left, the fabric folded carefully in my canvas shopping bag. At home, I laid out the pattern I'd used 20 years ago, the one that had always made me feel pretty even though it was simple. A-line, modest sleeves, nothing that would make me look like I was trying too hard. I pinned and cut, my hands remembering movements they'd done 1,000 times. The sewing took 2 days. My machine kept jamming, the thread breaking at odd moments like even it was trying to tell me this was a bad idea. But I fixed it every time, stayed up until midnight both nights, my back aching and my eyes burning. Wednesday afternoon, I finished the last hem stitch. The dress fit perfectly. I looked in my bedroom mirror and saw a woman who could belong anywhere. Not rich, not fancy, but dignified. Worthy. He'll see you, I told my reflection. He'll remember. Thursday, I planned the cake. His favorite had always been lemon with buttercream frosting, the recipe I'd learned from my own mother. 7 layers of moisture and sweetness, topped with blue sugar roses that took hours to pipe correctly. I walked to the grocery store because the bus didn't run near there anymore. Bought eggs and butter and lemons, the good vanilla extract that cost $12 but made everything taste like magic. At the checkout, the total came to $43. More than I usually spent on groceries in a week. The young man bagging my items looked at all the baking supplies. Someone's birthday? No, I said. Just showing someone I remember who they are. Back home, I preheated my ancient oven, the one that ran 20 degrees hot and had a broken timer. I knew its quirks like I knew my own heartbeat. Mixed the batter by hand because my electric mixer had died 3 Christmases ago. Poured it into pans I'd greased and floured with the same careful attention I'd given everything I'd ever made for Caleb. While the layers baked, I sat at my kitchen table and wrote what I'd say when I saw him. Not in a letter this time. Just practiced out loud, my voice filling the empty house. Caleb, I know you're busy. I know your life is different now. But I'm still your mother. That doesn't change just because you have fancy friends and a big house. I'm proud of you. I've always been proud of you. I just want to be part of your life again. The words sounded good in my kitchen.
Strong.
Reasonable. Surely he'd listen to reasonable. Friday, I assembled the cake. Each layer perfectly level, buttercream between them smooth as silk. I worked slowly, carefully, making it beautiful enough to sit on tables in that mansion. The blue roses took 3 hours. My hand cramped twice. But when I finished, it looked like something from a bakery window. I put it in the refrigerator and stepped back, satisfied. Everything was ready. The dress hung on my closet door, freshly pressed. The cake sat perfect and waiting. I'd even polished my good shoes, the black ones with a small heel that I'd worn to weddings and funerals and every important moment for the last decade. Saturday morning, I woke before dawn.
Couldn't sleep.
My stomach felt like it was full of birds, all of them trying to fly in different directions. I bathed carefully, using the lavender soap I saved for special occasions. Fixed my hair the way I'd seen in a magazine at the doctor's office, pinned up with a few soft pieces framing my face. Applied lipstick, just a touch, the dusty rose color that Caleb used to say made me look like a movie star. The dress slipped on like a teenage girl with headphones. An old man with a cane. A young mother with a crying baby who reminded me of Caleb at 6 months, colicky and impossible. Beautiful cake, the mother said when the baby finally quieted. Thank you. It's for my son. He's lucky. I smiled and looked out the window, watching the neighborhoods change. Small houses like mine giving way to bigger ones, then bigger still, until we reached the part of town where the houses had names instead of numbers and gates instead of front doors. I got off at the stop closest to the address on the flyer. The mansion towered above me, all white columns and manicured lawns, windows that probably cost more than my entire house. For just a moment, my courage faltered. What was I doing here? What made me think I belonged in this world? But then I remembered. I didn't need to belong in this world.
Caleb did.
And I belonged to Caleb whether he wanted to admit it or not. I walked up the long driveway, my shoes clicking on imported stone, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might break through my ribs. Through the windows, I could see people moving inside. Beautiful people. Important people. People who'd never had to save money in coffee cans or patch their own dresses. The front door was crystal and gold, ridiculously expensive, ridiculously beautiful. I raised my hand to knock. Then I heard her voice. That woman.
Camilla.
And everything I'd hoped for, everything I'd prepared and planned and practiced, crumbled like the cake I was holding. Maybe I should have stayed home. Maybe patience wasn't what this situation needed. Maybe some distances are too far to cross, no matter how good your dress is or how perfect your cake looks. But I was already here. And my son was inside, 10 feet away. So I took a breath, steadied the cake in my hands, and stepped forward into the moment that would break me. The inside of the mansion smelled like money. That's the only way I can describe it. Not just expensive perfume and fresh flowers, but something deeper. Confidence. Power. The kind of air that people breathe when they've never worried about choosing between electricity and groceries. My shoes were too loud on the marble floor. Every step echoed, announcing my presence, making me feel like an intruder, even though this was supposed to be a family dinner.
Family.
The word tasted bitter in my mouth. I moved through the entrance hall slowly, taking in the oil paintings that probably cost more than I'd earned in my entire life, the chandelier that looked like frozen diamonds, the staircase that curved up to a second floor I couldn't see. Voices drifted from somewhere ahead. Laughter. The clink of silverware against china. I followed the sounds like a ghost moving through a house that wasn't haunted yet, but probably should be. The dining room opened up before me, and I stopped in the doorway. 20 people, maybe 25, all dressed like they were going to the opera. The men in suits that fit like they'd been painted on. The women in dresses that probably had designer names I'd never heard of. And at the head of the table, sitting like a king in his castle, was Caleb. My son. My baby. The boy I'd raised alone. Loved with everything I had. Sacrificed for until there was nothing left to sacrifice.
He looked happy.
That's what killed me most. Not uncomfortable or stressed or worried. Just happy. Laughing at something a silver-haired man was saying, his hand resting casually on the table like he'd been born to sit at tables like this. And next to him, closer than anyone else, practically glowing in her white silk dress, was Camilla. She was beautiful in a way I'd never been, even when I was young.
Polished. Perfect.
Like someone had taken a photograph from a magazine and brought it to life. Her laugh was musical, practiced, the kind of sound that probably took lessons to learn. I stood there holding my homemade cake, in my homemade dress, feeling like a child who'd wandered into an adult conversation. Nobody noticed me at first. They were too busy being impressive, telling stories about vacations in places I couldn't pronounce, discussing business deals that involved more money than I'd seen in my entire 71 years. Then Camilla's eyes found me. She tilted her head, curious, and her perfect smile never wavered. "Oh," she said, her voice cutting through the conversation like a knife through butter. "Did someone order dessert? I thought we weren't having the cake until after dinner." Every head turned. 25 pairs of eyes landed on me, and I felt myself shrinking, becoming smaller and smaller until I was practically invisible. I started, but my voice came out wrong. Too quiet. Too nervous. Camilla stood, graceful as a dancer, and walked toward me. Her heels clicked on the marble, sharp and purposeful. "Darling," she called over her shoulder to Caleb, not taking her eyes off me, "your mother couldn't make it tonight, right?
Such a shame.
She would have loved seeing you this happy." The words hit me like a punch to the stomach. Your mother couldn't make it. Like I was someone else. Like I was already gone. I opened my mouth to correct her, to say I am his mother, I'm right here, but Caleb was rising from his chair, his face going pale, his eyes meeting mine across the room. For just a second, I saw something there. Recognition. Maybe even love. But then it shuttered closed, replaced by something else. Something that looked like panic. Camilla reached me, still smiling that perfect smile. I'm sorry. I think there's been a confusion. The catering staff should be using the back entrance. The kitchen is. I'm not catering, I said, finding my voice finally, holding the cake tighter. I'm Eleanor. Eleanor Morrison. Caleb's mother. The smile on Camilla's face didn't move.
Didn't even flicker.
But something changed in her eyes. A hardness. A calculation. Oh, she said, drawing out the word.
Oh.
She turned back to look at Caleb, and I watched him die a little. Watched him make a choice right there in front of everyone, in front of me, in front of God, and all these people who thought they knew him. He walked toward us, moving like someone walking toward an execution. His execution or mine. I couldn't tell. Mom, he said when he reached us, his voice so low only Camilla and I could hear. Not Mom. I'm so happy to see you. Not Mom. What a wonderful surprise. Just Mom. Flat and dead like a word he'd forgotten how to mean. I made your favorite cake, I said, holding it up between us like a shield. Lemon with buttercream. Remember? You used to say it tasted like sunshine. His jaw clenched. Behind him, the dinner guests were watching, murmuring to each other, the spell of their perfect evening broken by the old woman in the doorway. Camilla touched Caleb's arm, possessive and protective. Darling, perhaps we should speak privately? Her voice was sweet as poison. But before any of us could move, a booming voice cut through the room. Caleb? What's going on here? Who is this woman? A man strode forward, tall and commanding, with silver hair and a face that expected answers. Camilla's father, I realized. I could see the resemblance in the sharp cheekbones, the entitled way he held himself.
Caleb looked at me.
Then at Camilla. Then at her father. And I watched my son, my beautiful, ambitious, cowardly son, make his choice. This is Eleanor Morrison, he said, his voice steady now, professional. She's from my old neighborhood. A family friend. She seems to have gotten confused about tonight's event. A family friend. The cake felt heavy in my hands. Too heavy. Like it was made of stone instead of flour and sugar and love. I'm not confused, I said, my voice shaking but clear. I'm your mother, Caleb. I raised you. I'm your mother. The silence that followed was deafening. 25 people holding their breath. Camilla's hand tightening on Caleb's arm. Her father's eyes narrowing dangerously. And Caleb, my son, the boy I'd given everything for, looked at me with eyes as cold as winter and said, Mom, you shouldn't have come. Not, you're mistaken. Not, of course you're my mother. Just you shouldn't have come. Like I was the problem. Like my existence was the thing that didn't belong. Would you forgive your child after hearing what comes next? Comment below. I want to know. We need to talk. Outside. Caleb's hand closed around my elbow, firm but not quite rough, and guided me back through that crystal door before I could say another word. The cake stayed clutched in my hands, a ridiculous prop in a scene I'd never rehearsed. The night air hit my face, cold and sharp. The door clicked shut behind us, muffling the confused murmurs from inside. We stood on the front steps, under lights that cost more than my car, and for the first time in 6 years, my son and I were alone together. What were you thinking? His voice was tight, controlled, but I could hear the rage underneath. Showing up here. Making a scene. Making a scene? The words came out strangled. Caleb, I'm your mother. I brought you a cake. How is that making a scene? He ran his hand through his perfect hair, messing it up for the first time tonight. You don't understand. You can't just show up at events like this. There are optics. There are optics. I stared at him. Is that what I am to you now? Bad optics. That's not what I meant. Then what did you mean? When you told them I was a family friend? When you changed your last name to Whitford? When you've been telling people your mother is dead? His face went white. Actually white, like I'd slapped him. Mrs. Chun has a cousin who works at your company. I continued, my voice shaking but steady. She told me what you've been saying. That you built yourself from nothing. That you're self-made. That your parents died when you were young. Mom, don't. I held up one hand, still balancing the cake with the other. Don't lie to me anymore. I've had 6 years of lies. 6 years of canceled visits and forgotten birthdays and phone calls that got shorter and colder until they stopped completely. I deserve the truth. Why did you erase me? He looked at the door, then back at me, and I saw him calculating, weighing his options, deciding how much truth to give the old woman who wouldn't go away. You want to know? He said finally.
Fine.
You want the truth? Camilla's family is connected. Her father owns half the commercial real estate in the Pacific Northwest. When I started dating her, when I saw the life I could have, the opportunities, the doors that could open, I knew I couldn't bring my past into it. Your past. The words felt like ash in my mouth. Is that what I am? You don't fit, Mom. You don't understand how this world works. These people, they care about breeding, about background, about whether you summer in Martha's Vineyard or the Cape. They care about which prep school you went to, which university, which clubs your family belongs to. So you told them I was dead. I told them what I needed to tell them. His voice was cold now, matter of fact. Camilla's father would never have approved of our marriage if he knew I came from a broke single mother in a house with peeling paint. He would have seen me as a gold digger, someone trying to marry up. But you were trying to marry up. That's not, he stopped caught. I love Camilla.
Do you?
Or do you love what she represents? He looked at me then, really looked at me, and for just a second I saw my little boy again. The one who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms. The one who cried when I couldn't afford to take him to Disneyland like his friends. The one who promised he'd take care of me when he grew up. I love her, he said quietly. And I love the life we've built. I can't lose that. So you'll lose me instead. It doesn't have to be that way. Just you can't come to these events. You can't contact my colleagues or Camilla's family. If you want to be part of my life, it has to be private, separate. I stared at him, this stranger wearing my son's face. Private. Like I'm something shameful. Like I'm a secret you have to hide. I'm trying to protect you, he said, and I almost believed him. Almost. These people are ruthless. If they find out I lied, if they see you as a weakness, they'll use it against me. Against us. I'm asking you to understand. No. The word came out stronger than I expected. You're asking me to disappear. To pretend I don't exist. To let you keep living this lie while I sit alone in my house wondering if my son even remembers I'm alive. Mom, I wore secondhand clothes so you could have new ones. I worked double shifts so you could go to medical school. I sold my mother's wedding ring, the only thing of value I ever owned, to pay for your tuition. And you're asking me to understand. His jaw tightened. I never asked you to do those things. The words hit me like bullets.
Clean. Precise. Deadly.
You never asked, I repeated slowly. You're right. You never asked. I just did them. Because that's what mothers do. They sacrifice. They give. They love even when it costs them everything. And I'm grateful. I am. But gratitude doesn't change reality. This is my life now. These are the choices I've made. And I need you to respect them. I looked down at the cake in my hands. 7 layers of love. 3 hours of piping blue roses. All for a son who thought I was a problem to be managed. You were raised better than this, I said quietly. I was raised poor, he shot back. There's a difference. Something inside me broke then. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just a quiet snap, like a thread that had been pulled too tight for too long. I need you to leave, Caleb said.
Please.
Before Camilla's father starts asking questions I can't answer. What will you tell them? About me? I'll tell them you got confused. That you have memory problems. Early dementia, maybe. That I'll take care of it. I looked at my son. This man who'd learned to lie so smoothly, he probably believed it himself now. And I realized something I should have understood years ago. He wasn't going to change. This wasn't a phase. This was who he'd chosen to become. Okay, I said. He blinked, surprised. Okay, I'll leave.
I won't contact you again.
I won't embarrass you in front of your important friends. I won't show up at your dinners or call your office or send you letters you'll never read. Relief flooded his face. Thank you, Mom. Thank you. I knew you'd understand. I set the cake down on the steps, carefully, making sure it was level. But I want you to know something, Caleb. Everything I did because I loved you, not because I wanted something back. Not because I was keeping score. Just because you were my son, and I would have given you the world if I could. I know, he said, but I could tell he didn't. Not really. And one day, when you have children of your own, you'll understand what it feels like to love someone more than you love yourself. To want their happiness more than you want your own breath. And maybe then you'll realize what you threw away here tonight. I turned and walked down those imported stone steps, my shoes clicking in the silence, my heart breaking with every step. Behind me, I heard him call out, Mom, wait. But I didn't wait. I kept walking.
Down the driveway.
Past the manicured lawns and the gates that separated his world from mine. I walked until I reached the bus stop, until I sat on that cold metal bench, until I finally let myself cry. And somewhere behind me, in a mansion full of lies, my son picked up a lemon cake made with love and carried it inside to people who would never know what it cost. The house felt different when I got home. Smaller, emptier, like walking into a tomb that used to be a sanctuary. I hung my blue dress in the closet, next to the yellow one from his graduation. 2 dresses. 2 different versions of hope.
Both of them useless now.
Monday morning, I did what I always did. Watered the hydrangeas. Made coffee. Sat at my kitchen table and watched the sun come up over Mrs. Chen's roof. Normal things. Ordinary things. Things that didn't require a son who loved you back. The difference was I wasn't waiting anymore. Wasn't hoping. Wasn't keeping the phone close in case he called. I'd closed that door. He'd asked me to, and I had. But apparently someone else wanted to make sure it stayed closed. The letter arrived on Thursday. Thick cream-colored envelope, the kind that screams money and lawyers and trouble. My hands shook as I opened it. Dear Mrs. Morrison, it began.
No, Eleanor.
No, Miss Ellie. Just the cold formality of people who'd never met me but had already decided who I was. We represent the interests of the Ashford family and their associated business entities. It has come to our attention that you recently attended a private family event uninvited and made certain claims regarding your relationship to our client, Caleb Whitford. Whitford. Not Morrison. They didn't even acknowledge his real name. To protect the privacy and professional reputation of all parties involved, we are requiring you to sign the enclosed non-disclosure agreement. This document legally binds you to refrain from discussing, sharing, or implying any familial connection to Mr. Whitford or the Ashford family. I read that line 3 times. Legally binds you to refrain from discussing any familial connection. They wanted to make it official. To turn me into nobody through paperwork and threats. Failure to comply will result in legal action, including but not limited to claims of harassment, defamation, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. The Ashford family has considerable resources and will not hesitate to pursue all available remedies. I set the letter down and laughed. Actually laughed, a sound that hurt coming out, sharp and bitter. They were threatening me. These people who'd never worked a double shift in their lives, who'd never chosen between medicine and groceries, who'd never sacrificed anything more valuable than a stock option, they were threatening me. The NDA sat there, thick and official, with little yellow sticky tabs marking where I was supposed to sign. I imagined what would happen if I did. If I made it legal. If I let them erase me not just from Caleb's life, but from existence itself. Mrs. Chen knocked on my door that afternoon, concern written all over her face. Ellie, you okay? You look different. Do I? Like you're planning something. I smiled. Maybe I was. That night, I couldn't sleep. Kept thinking about that letter. About the arrogance of it. About the assumption that I'd just comply, just disappear, just let them win because they had money and lawyers and power. Around 2 in the morning, I got up and made tea. Sat at my kitchen table with the NDA spread out in front of me, reading the fine print by lamplight. If they wanted me quiet, that meant they were afraid of something. People don't threaten you unless they think you're dangerous. But what could I possibly be dangerous to? I was a 71-year-old woman with an 8th grade education and arthritic hands. What threat could I pose to their empire?
Then it hit me.
Not what I could do. What I knew. I'd talked to Caleb over the years, even when those conversations got shorter and colder. He'd mentioned things. Deals that sounded strange. Numbers that didn't quite add up. Investment opportunities that seemed too good to be true. I'd never paid much attention because I didn't understand that world. But maybe I should have been paying attention. I thought about Thomasine, my friend who'd worked at Pacific Northwest Bank for 30 years before retiring. She'd mentioned once, casually, that she'd seen some questionable transactions from Whitford Industries. Your boy's playing with fire, she'd said. Those kinds of returns don't come from honest work. I defended him then. Told her she was wrong. That Caleb was successful because he was smart and hardworking, not because he was doing anything shady. But Thomasine knew numbers the way I knew hydrangeas. And if she said something was wrong, something was wrong. Friday morning, I called her. Thomasine? It's Ellie. Remember what you said about Caleb's company? She was quiet for a moment. Ellie, I shouldn't have said that. It's not my place. I need to know.
Please.
He's not my son anymore. Not really. So you wouldn't be betraying anything. Another pause. Then, meet me at the diner on First Street. 2 o'clock. And Ellie? Don't tell anyone where you're going. I sat across from Thomasine in a booth that smelled like grease and old coffee, and she spread papers between us. Bank statements. Transaction records. Things she probably shouldn't have had copies of. Things that could get her in trouble. This is what I know, she said. Whitford Industries is running something called a Ponzi scheme. You know what that is? I shook my head. It's when you pay old investors with new investors' money instead of actual profits. It works great until it doesn't. Until you run out of new people and the whole thing collapses like a house of cards. She pointed to numbers I didn't understand. Your son's company is built on sand. And when it falls, a lot of people are going to lose everything. How long until it falls? 6 months. Maybe less. Someone's going to figure it out. And when they do, the FBI will come knocking. People go to prison for this kind of thing, Ellie. Real prison. Federal prison. I stared at the papers, my heart pounding. He doesn't know, right? Maybe he doesn't know what his company is doing. Thomasine gave me a look. Honey, he's the CEO. He knows. I drove home in a fog, those papers tucked in my purse like bombs. Evidence. Proof. The kind of information that could destroy everything Caleb had built. The NDA was still on my kitchen table where I'd left it. I looked at it now with different eyes. They weren't just afraid I'd embarrass them at dinner parties. They were afraid I knew something, or would figure something out. They wanted me legally bound to silence before I became a problem. But here's what they didn't understand about mothers. About women like me. About people who've spent their whole lives being underestimated. We know how to wait.
We know how to watch.
And when the time is right, we know exactly where to strike. I picked up my pen and wrote across the NDA in my careful handwriting. I declined to sign this document. Eleanor Morrison. Then I sealed those bank papers in an envelope, addressed it carefully to the Securities and Exchange Commission, and placed it on my counter. Not mailed. Not yet. Just ready. Waiting. If they wanted me quiet, they picked the wrong woman. The envelope sat on my counter for 3 days. I walked past it 100 times, my hand hovering over it, my conscience screaming at me from a dozen different directions. This was my son. My baby. The boy I'd raised, loved, sacrificed for. Turning him and felt like cutting out my own heart and handing it to strangers. But he wasn't that boy anymore, was he? He was a man who'd erased me. A man who'd built an empire on lies and fraud. A man who was going to take hundreds, maybe thousands of people down with him when it all collapsed. Sunday morning, Mrs. Chin knocked on my door. Ellie, you have a visitor. I looked past her and saw a car in my driveway.
Black.
Expensive. A driver in a suit standing next to it. My stomach dropped. A woman stepped out of the back seat. Not Camilla. Someone older, harder, wearing a gray suit that probably cost more than my house. She walked up my path like she owned it, like she owned everything. "Mrs. Morrison," she said, not offering her hand. "I'm Patricia Chambers, legal counsel for the Ashford family. We need to talk. I don't have anything to say to you. You didn't sign the NDA."
No.
Her eyes narrowed. That was unwise. The Ashford family is prepared to compensate you for your discretion. $50,000, deposited in any account you specify, in exchange for your signature and your silence. $50,000. More money than I'd ever seen at once. Enough to fix my roof and my water heater and buy a new car and still have money left over for emergencies.
No, I said.
100,000. My heart skipped. 100,000. Enough to never worry about money again. To live comfortably for the rest of my life. "Ma'am," Patricia said, her voice softening slightly, "I understand this is difficult. But your son has made his choice. He's built a life that doesn't include you. Taking money doesn't change that. It just makes your remaining years easier." She wasn't wrong. The money wouldn't bring Caleb back. Wouldn't make him love me again. Wouldn't undo any of this. "Why are you so desperate for my silence?" I asked. "I'm not desperate. I'm efficient. Loose ends create problems. Is that what I am? A loose end?" "You're a woman with nothing to lose," Patricia said bluntly. "That makes you dangerous. We're offering you a way to end this gracefully, to walk away with dignity and financial security." I thought about the envelope on my counter, about Thomasin's papers, about all those people who'd invested their retirement savings in Caleb's company, trusting him, believing him, not knowing they were being robbed. "No," I said again. Patricia's expression hardened. "Then you leave us no choice. We'll pursue legal action. Harassment.
Stalking.
Defamation. By the time we're done, you'll have nothing. No house, no savings, no. Get off my property." She stared at me, shocked. "Excuse me?" I said, "Get off my property.
Now.
Before I call the police and tell them you're threatening me." For a long moment, we stood there, two women from different worlds, locked in a battle neither of us had expected. Then Patricia turned on her expensive heel and walked back to her expensive car. "You're making a mistake," she called back. "Probably," I said. "But it's my mistake to make." I watched the car drive away, then went inside and picked up the envelope. My hands weren't shaking anymore. I knew what I had to do. Monday morning, I called Thomasin. I need more than just bank statements. I need everything.
Timeline. Names. Amounts.
I need enough evidence that they can't ignore it. "Ellie, are you sure? This is your son." "I'm sure." She met me that afternoon with a folder so thick it barely closed. Transaction records. Emails. Investor complaints. Whistleblower testimonies from employees who'd been fired when they asked questions. "This is enough to bury him," Thomasin said quietly. "Federal charges.
Prison time.
Complete financial ruin." I took the folder home and spent 3 days going through it, learning the language of fraud, understanding exactly what Caleb had done. It was worse than I'd thought. Worse than Thomasin had said. He'd knowingly lied to investors, falsified records, created fake profits, used new money to pay old debts while siphoning millions into offshore accounts. This wasn't just bad business. This was intentional, calculated theft. The boy I'd raised would never have done this. But the man he'd become? The man who'd erased his own mother? That man was capable of anything. Thursday afternoon, I made copies of everything, organized it carefully, wrote a cover letter explaining who I was, how I'd obtained the information, and why I was coming forward. "My name is Eleanor Morrison. I am the mother of Caleb Whitford, born Caleb Morrison. I am providing this information not out of spite or revenge, but because I believe in truth and justice. My son has hurt many people. He will hurt many more if someone doesn't stop him. I am that someone. Friday morning, I walked to the post office. The envelope felt heavy in my hands. Final. Once I dropped it in that mail slot, there was no taking it back. No changing my mind. I thought about Caleb as a baby, as a little boy, as a teenager who hugged me after graduation and promised to make me proud. I thought about the man at that dinner party calling me nobody, asking me to disappear. I thought about all those people who trusted him with their savings, their futures, their children's college funds. And I dropped the envelope in the slot. It fell with a soft thud. Just one envelope among thousands. But it was enough to change everything. I walked home slowly, feeling lighter and heavier at the same time. I'd done it. I'd turned in my own son. I'd chosen strangers over family. I'd become the kind of mother who destroys her child's life. Or maybe I'd become the kind of mother who stops her child from destroying himself and everyone around him. I'd probably never know which. That night, I slept better than I had in weeks. And if I dreamed of a little boy with curly hair and a gap-toothed smile, well, at least in my dreams he still loved me back. 3 weeks passed. Normal weeks. Quiet weeks. I watered my garden, had coffee with Mrs. Chun, pretended my world hadn't tilted on its axis. Then Tuesday morning, the news broke. I wasn't watching television, but Mrs. Chun came running over, her eyes wide. "Ellie, turn on Channel 7.
Now."
The headline scrolled across the bottom of the screen. FBI raids Whitford Industries in massive fraud investigation. I sat down hard on my couch and watched it unfold. Federal agents in windbreakers carrying boxes out of that glass building I'd seen in photos. Caleb being let out in handcuffs, his head down, photographers everywhere. Camilla standing beside her father, her face pale, her hand covering her mouth. The reporter's voice was professional, detached. Authorities say this Ponzi scheme defrauded investors of over $200 million. CEO Caleb Whitford faces charges of securities fraud, wire fraud, and money laundering. If convicted, he could face up to 30 years in federal prison. 30 years. My son could spend 30 years behind bars. I should have felt guilty. Should have felt like the worst mother in history. But all I felt was tired. And maybe, underneath that, the smallest bit of relief. He couldn't hurt anyone else now. The news coverage went on for days. Every channel. Every newspaper. The fall of Whitford Industries, they called it. The boy wonder's betrayal. From rags to riches to prison. Reporters found out he'd changed his name. Dug into his past. Found people from our old neighborhood who remembered him, who talked about how sweet he used to be, how close we were, how shocking this all was. Nobody could find me though. I'd unplugged my phone. Stayed inside. Let the storm pass over me like I'd been invisible all along. The investors started coming forward. Retirees who'd lost everything. Families who'd invested their children's college funds. Small business owners who'd trusted Caleb with their expansion capital. Their faces haunted me. But not as much as Caleb's face had haunted me when he called me nobody. Camilla's father held a press conference, looked straight into the cameras and said, "My family was deceived by Mr. Whitford just like everyone else. We had no knowledge of his criminal activities. We are cooperating fully with authorities." Translation: we're throwing him under the bus to save ourselves. The engagement was off. The mansion was seized. The bank accounts frozen. Everything Caleb had built, everything he'd sacrificed his soul for, gone in a matter of days. I watched it all from my kitchen table, drinking coffee that had gone cold, feeling nothing and everything at once. Mrs. Chun sat with me sometimes. Didn't say much. Just sat. Good friends know when silence is the only thing that helps. "You did the right thing," she said once. Did I? All those people who lost money, you saved future victims. Maybe hundreds more. Maybe thousands. I destroyed my son's life. Ellie, honey, your son destroyed his own life. You just stopped him from taking more people down with him. Maybe she was right. Maybe she wasn't. All I knew was that I couldn't undo it now. The trial was set for early fall. The prosecutor called me. Asked if I'd testify. I said no. They had enough evidence without me. I'd given them the roadmap. I wouldn't stand in court and put the final nails in my son's coffin. Some revenges are quiet. Some justice happens in shadows. And some mothers do terrible things because terrible things need to be done. Summer turned to fall. The leaves on my hydrangeas started to brown. The air got colder. Life moved forward the way it always does, indifferent to human drama. I started sleeping better. Started tending my garden more carefully. Started thinking about maybe adopting a cat. Small things.
Simple things.
Things that didn't require sons who loved you back. Then one night in October, 3 months after the FBI raid, someone knocked on my door. It was late.
Past 10.
Nobody visited me that late. I looked through the peephole and my heart stopped. Caleb stood on my porch. Not in a suit. Not polished and perfect. He wore jeans and a wrinkled shirt, his hair grown out, his face thinner, older, broken in ways I'd never seen. He was out on bail, I realized, waiting for trial. Probably not supposed to be here. I stood with my hand on the doorknob, frozen.
Part of me wanted to open it.
Part of me wanted to pretend I wasn't home. Part of me wanted to call the police.
He knocked again.
Mom, he said through the door, his voice cracking. Mom, please. I know you're there. I just want to talk. Quiet justice doesn't knock. It whispers. But sometimes, late at night, it stands on your porch and begs to be let in. I took a breath and opened the door. He looked smaller than I remembered, broken in a way that had nothing to do with size. His eyes were red like he'd been crying or not sleeping or both. Can I come in? He asked. I stepped aside. He walked past me, and for the first time in 6 years, my son stood in my living room. He looked around like he was seeing it for the first time. The worn couch. The photos on the wall. The coffee table I'd bought at a garage sale 30 years ago. His whole childhood was in this room, and he seemed to be just now noticing it existed. Sit down, I said. He sat on the couch. I sat in my chair across from him. The same chair I'd rocked him in when he was a baby, when the world was simpler and love was enough. I lost everything, he said finally. The company. The house. Camilla. Her father won't even take my calls. My lawyers say I'm looking at 15 to 20 years, maybe more if they can prove intent. And they can, because I knew what I was doing. I knew. I didn't say anything, just waited. I kept telling myself it would work out. That I'd make enough money to pay everyone back, that nobody would get hurt, that it was just temporary. But it wasn't temporary. It was fraud. And now. He looked at his hands. Now I'm going to prison. Yes, I said. You probably are. Did you do it? The question came out quiet, almost hopeful, like part of him wanted me to say yes.
To have someone else to blame.
Did you turn me in? I looked at my son. Really looked at him. Saw the boy I'd raised and the man he'd become, all existing in the same damaged person. Does it matter? I need to know.
Why?
So you can hate me? So you can add me to the list of people who betrayed you? I leaned forward. Caleb, you did this to yourself. Every choice, every lie, every time you picked ambition over decency, that was you. Not me. Not Camilla. Not her father or the FBI or anyone else. You. He started crying then. Real tears. The kind that shake your whole body. I'm sorry, he sobbed. Mom, I'm so sorry. I was wrong. About everything.
About you.
About what matters. I threw away the only person who ever really loved me for people who didn't care if I lived or died. I wanted to comfort him. Wanted to pull him into my arms the way I had when he was little, and the world felt too big and scary. But I stayed in my chair. When did you know? He asked, wiping his eyes. When did you know what I was doing? When you sent lawyers to threaten me. When you offered me money to disappear. When you fought so hard to keep me quiet, I knew you were hiding something big. So you investigated. I asked questions. Found answers. He nodded slowly. And you chose them over me. All those investors. Strangers. You chose them. I chose truth. I chose justice. I chose to stop you before you hurt more people. You could have come to me. Could have warned me. given me a chance to fix it. Would you have? Would you have come clean if I'd asked? The silence was his answer. I'm your mother, I said. I loved you more than my own life. But loving you doesn't mean protecting you from consequences. Sometimes it means letting you face them. He looked up at me with those eyes, those beautiful eyes I'd looked into when he was hours old, and I saw understanding there. Not forgiveness. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But understanding. I don't expect you to forgive me, he said. For any of it. For erasing you, for the things I said, for choosing them over you. I don't expect anything. I just wanted to see you one more time before. He trailed off. Before prison. Yeah. I stood up and walked to the kitchen. Came back with 2 mugs of tea. Handed him one. He took it like it was the most precious thing he'd ever held. We sat there in silence, drinking tea, mother and son, broken in different ways but together for the first time in too long. Mom, he said finally, can I ask you something? Yes. Do you still love me? After everything? I looked at this man who'd hurt me more than anyone ever had. This man who is still, somehow, underneath all the mistakes and lies, my son. Yes, I said. I still love you. I always will. That's what mothers do. We love even when it costs us everything. Fresh tears ran down his face. I don't deserve it. No, I agreed. You don't. But love isn't about deserving. It's about choosing. And I choose to love you. Even now. Even this. He set down his mug and moved to kneel in front of my chair, his head in my lap like he was 6 years old again. And finally, I touched him. Ran my fingers through his hair the way I used to when he couldn't sleep. I'm going to plead guilty, he whispered. Take responsibility. Try to make whatever amends I can. It won't fix anything, but it's a start. That's good, I said. That's the son I raise. We stayed like that for a long time. Maybe an hour. Maybe more. Just a mother and her son, finding their way back to each other through the wreckage of everything they'd lost. When he finally left, we both knew it might be years before we saw each other again. But we also knew something had healed in that small living room. Not everything. Not even most things. But enough. I watched him walk to his car. Watched him turn back to wave. Watched him drive away into a future that would be hard and painful and hopefully, eventually, redemptive. Then I closed the door and sat in my chair and felt something I hadn't felt in 6 years. Peace. Not happiness. Not joy. Just peace. The quiet kind that comes from doing what's right even when it's hard. Even when it costs you everything. The next morning, I tended my hydrangeas. They were blooming again, bright blue against the autumn sky. Mrs. Chen came over with coffee, and we sat on my porch, watching the world wake up. How you doing, Ellie? She asked. I'm okay, I said. And meant it. Because sometimes the sweetest revenge isn't revenge at all. It's truth. It's justice. It's knowing you loved someone enough to save them from themselves, even if they hate you for it. And sometimes, if you're lucky, they come back. Changed. Broken. Ready to be put back together the right way this time. My son went to prison 8 months later. 15 years. I write him letters now. Real ones. Mailed ones. And he writes back. We're finding our way back to each other, one letter at a time. And that's enough. Because love can forgive, but it also remembers. Betrayal may silence the heart, but truth restores dignity. And quiet justice, the kind that moves slow and steady like rivers carving through stone, always finds its way home. Always. If this story touched you, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next story. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your words might inspire someone who needs them today. And remember, sometimes the hardest love is the truest love. See you in the next one.